Alice never thought there was anything wrong with letting her baby Jack sleep with their foal, but she couldn't have been further from the truth. However, it would take 3 years for her to wake up to the harsh reality of the matter and realize the mistake she made. Welcome to Wonderbot Animals. Alice didn't quite know what to think while she was in the waiting room. The police hadn't spoken to her when they found out what had happened, so she didn't know what was going on, but she had a feeling it was more than just an investigation. When the police approached her, she didn't have time to ask a question before she was taken to the interrogation room. To say she was surprised is an understatement. Alice asked to be let go, but as the police began to explain the situation, she suddenly realized that it all made sense. It all led back to her. But what was really going on? What happened to her son Jack and the foal? And why was Alice suspected? Well, to figure that out, we have to go back to the beginning. From the moment Alice looked the young foal in the eye, she knew this was the horse she wanted. It wasn't a full-grown horse, as her husband Greg preferred, but she wanted a horse for whom she could be a second mother. Admittedly, raising it would be quite a challenge, but she was pretty sure she could manage it. As time went on, she doubted herself here and there, but she ultimately felt she made the right decision. That said, Alice had little knowledge of horses and how to care for them. After some convincing, Alice and her husband finalized the adoption process. The man who was giving up the foal for adoption seemed very happy to see the animal go, and he said it was because he deserved a happy home. But was he telling the truth? On the way home, they decided to name the foal Bonfire. The horse seemed nice, and when they got home and he met Jack, they seemed to bond right away. The little guy was over the moon with excitement. Jack petted Bonfire without hesitation and lay down next to him. They seemed very comfortable with each other right out of the gate. When Greg entered the stables, the first thing he saw was his son lying down with a big animal. Bonfire, in turn, gave the kid a few playful licks, and Alice couldn't help but smile. It was everything she had hoped for. This display put Greg at ease, but he would still keep an eye on the foal. As it turns out, it wouldn't be long before they began to see red flags in Bonfire's relationship with her son Jack. The first thing Greg noticed was that Bonfire was very sociable with people. It didn't matter how old they were or how they reacted to him. However, he didn't get along as well with other horses. Sometimes he even became aggressive. He didn't attack the other horses, but he still showed his teeth and always kept an eye on them. Bonfire was particularly protective of Jack, so Greg was sure that if one of the horses got close to the boy, Bonfire could snap. The bond between Jack and Bonfire seemed special. They were always together, and Bonfire never let Jack out of his sight. It even got to the point where Jack decided to sleep in the stables with Bonfire. A beautiful sight to see, but Greg didn't think it was a good idea. Before we continue, make sure to like this video to help it reach 7K likes, and don't forget to subscribe. Another strange thing about Bonfire is that he often ate things he shouldn't. In most cases, it wasn't a big issue, and it only caused the horse to be a little sick. However, nearly 3 years after Bonfire joined the family, the routine upset stomach turned into a health crisis, and they had no idea what was wrong with the horse. Despite their best efforts, the family couldn't find the cause, and it became evident that this wasn't just the regular inconvenience of Bonfire eating something he shouldn't. Alice decided to take him to the vet alone to avoid any distress on Jack. However, when she got to the vet, the doctor told her Bonfire needed to be transported to a specialized care center for horses. Alice agreed, and she went back home to wait for the staff from the center to pick Bonfire up. When they did, Jack was very distressed. They all were. It was sad to see Bonfire go, but it was the best thing they could do for his health. Jack locked himself in his room when Bonfire was gone, and he didn't even come out for dinner. The next morning, Alice went to wake Jack up for school. Usually, a knock on the door was enough, but that day it didn't seem to work. 15 minutes had passed, and Jack still hadn't come out of his room. When Alice went to open the door, she got the shock of her life. Jack was nowhere to be seen. His bed was empty and there was no sign of her son. In a panic, she asked Greg to go look for him with her, but he was nowhere to be found. They searched everywhere in and around the house, but it was clear that the boy was not there. After a few minutes, they pulled themselves together and Greg picked up the phone to call the police. However, the police told him that they couldn't register a person's disappearance before 24 hours. Just for your information, there's no waiting period to report someone's disappearance, and when the disappeared is a child, things should move even faster. Understandably, Greg was outraged by the police's response, but there was nothing he could do except search for his child himself. So, he got in the car and started driving around the neighborhood hoping to find his son. He drove for hours and hours, but there was no sign of Jack. That night, Greg and Alice were completely devastated. Where could their son be? How could he disappear into thin air? It turned their world upside down. The next day, Greg immediately went to the police station to report his son as missing. He was still upset that he had to wait and waste an entire day, but after some paperwork, the police finally started working on the case. The city they lived in wasn't dangerous, and only minor crimes happened, so something as big as a child's disappearance was out of the ordinary. As a result, the entire community came together. The police started investigating and questioning people, and the news and local papers showed pictures of Jack, prompting people to call the police if they saw him. However, days passed and no leads came in. Then, things took a turn. While investigating the case, the police stumbled upon some disturbing facts about Alice's past. This was enough to consider her a prime suspect. You see, Alice was involved in petty crime in her past. She grew up poor in a seedy neighborhood, so she fell in with bad people to make money. As a result, she had a criminal record under another name, and her past activities were linked to child trafficking. When the police told her what they found, Alice burst into tears. She thought that after all these years, her past would no longer follow her, but she was wrong. Alice indeed had a past, and she had done things she wasn't proud of, but she did them out of desperation, and she had gotten her life together since then. She would never do anything to hurt her son, and when the police made it clear they suspected her, she felt defeated. Alice told them time and time again that she didn't have anything to do with her son's disappearance, but they didn't believe her. The police didn't have any other leads, so they stuck to Alice. Days passed, and Alice remained in custody at the police station. Meanwhile, Greg fell into a state of despair. First, his son had disappeared, and then he learned that his wife was a suspect. He didn't know what to think, but soon he would have all the answers he needed. Greg knew about Alice's difficult past and the fact that she changed her name, but he understood that was her past, and they loved each other. Now, years later, Alice found herself in a situation that Greg had feared. He often worried that she might fall back into old habits and go back down the wrong path. For years, everything went perfectly, but now Greg was starting to doubt Alice. However, there was no reason to think that Alice could hurt Jack in any way. She was a perfect mother and never showed him anything but unconditional love. In all the fights they had, Alice never said anything wrong or hurt Jack in any way. Everything changed after the police received a phone call. It was late when the police officers opened Alice's cell and told her she was free to go. She didn't understand what was happening and asked the officers to tell her what was going on. The police had made a terrible mistake and they knew it. Earlier that day, the police received a call from a man a few towns away. He worked for the Horse Rescue Center. That was the place where Bonfire had been taken, and that's the phone call that changed everything. Bonfire was kept in a stable where he received the best possible care, and he started getting stronger by the day. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, but they kept hearing strange sounds coming from his stable, sounds that horses couldn't make. After a few days of hearing the same sounds, they decided to take a look at the stables to see what could be causing it. At first, everything seemed normal. Bonfire was standing in the middle of the barn, looking happy, and there was nothing strange about the water tank in the stable. But when they checked the hay bales, they were surprised beyond all expectations. They found a child, and that child turned out to be Jack. The day Bonfire was taken, Jack snuck into the trailer and went with his best friend. He just couldn't leave his horse alone. He had to be with him. When Alice found out, she burst into tears of joy. When she was let out of her cell and reunited with her husband, they hugged and set out to pick up their son and horse, who was ready to go home. Can you believe this turn of events? Have you ever heard of a child following their pet like this? Let us know in the comments. Also, don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel for more. Until the next one.